My name is Alexandra Page Farber Light, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I've been a dancer pretty much my whole life from the age of 3, and I've been a professional dancer for the last 12 years. I dance for Texas Ballet Theater. You know, I always say, like, my mom signed me up. Every year she would ask me, do you want to do it again? And every year I was so excited, and kind of the case is to this day. That's what I'm doing every year. I just sign up again. Balanchine said, dance is woman. Like, that's one of his most famous quotes, which it's like so sick and twisted because, like, at the same time, like, he mentally abused women to no end. I mean, like, it's ridiculous when you hear the stories, and still, like, almost from beyond the grave, he still does, because no one, if you try and tell your story, you try and, like, share that, like, people come out and, like, attack you because there's such intense followers of him. So the feminist answer is women need to start telling the stories. Yeah. I think for my generation of dancers in the 90s, it was, like, very in vogue to be, like, just the thinnest waif of a dancer. I mean, also in, like, popular culture, like, you think about the models and things like that, it was just, like, culturally what was going on. And today it's much better. Like, there are many more dancers. Like, the repertoire got so challenging athletically. You cannot be a waif and perform this repertoire. It's just, like, very difficult. I mean, at the best case, you end up like me and just sort of have this constant mental nagging about your body. And I think anyone who denies it needs more therapy, probably, because constantly around you and you're surrounded by mirrors all day. Like, what do you, how can you escape this? And then at worst, I mean, people die. It was, like, probably mid 19th century to late 19th century where, like, this idea of, like, the dying woman is, like, a huge theme in ballet. Like, I think of Giselle, Sleeping Beauty, that barely there, like, waif, like I think of the scene in Giselle, she's, like, dead and leaving him. It's, like, the music is so beautiful, but yeah, it's like she's just this, like, so it romanticizes this idea of like a woman who's, like, barely there. So, like, of course, like, the body image to become, like, where it did at the turn of the 21st century, like, it makes perfect sense that it would get there. And my grandmother, she was my Savta, her name was Esther Frankel Farber, and she founded the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance, or she was one of the founding members, and was a huge patron of the arts, and I think is part of why my parents, no, I mean, they would have anyway, probably, but part of the reason why I became an artist is because she instilled this in my life. And I always heard the term JOFA, Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. Like, when I was young, they would say JOFA, but so this word feminist, I suppose that's the first time I heard the word feminist, is probably from that, and asking, what is JOFA? But the meaning, I knew that the main focus of JOFA was basically, like, when you have a bar mitzvah for a boy or a bat mitzvah for a girl, you get to read from the Torah, like, from the scroll. And in conservative, big C conservative Judaism, women and men are allowed to read from the Torah. But in Orthodox Judaism, in, like, the traditional way or whatever, women were not permitted to read this way in synagogue. It was, like, only for men. So JOFA was a big proponent of allowing people at the Orthodox level, allowing women to read. So I think at the most basic sense, like, feminism to me was like, okay, women aren't allowed to do this thing, but why not? So let's make it so they can do this thing. My dad always speaks about God as a woman, like, always says she, I'm of the belief that God is, there's no you can't gender this thing. Like, I think God is a convenient term because we can't know. If we could know, then what would that, it wouldn't be God, I just think we say God, or we say he, or we say she, because it's like a placeholder. But my dad always says this thing about God being a woman, or using she terms. and like I can never tell if he's like kind of joking, but anytime I ask him, he's very serious about it. It's still something that confuses me. I don't know if I'll ever know 100% like what this is, because every time I try and ask him, like I feel like I never get a straight answer, but it's very curious. I will never forget when I was taught for the first time what the Holocaust was. Maybe I was like 6 or 7 years old. And like our teacher, our Mora is teacher in Hebrew, she was describing Hitler, but she didn't say his name. She just said there was a bad man who hated Jews and hated lots of different people. And he said that if you didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair, he would kill you. And I remember like, I'll never forget like the feeling of that moment of her telling me that. And I remember, because of course I have brown eyes, and my sister, I have two sisters, but the youngest one wasn't alive yet. So the one at the time, I remember immediately thinking, okay, my one sister would be okay because she has blue eyes, but thinking about my mom, and she has hazel eyes, and I remember asking the Morah, what about hazel eyes? Like I was so freaked out about this. Like I'll never forget like this moment. And I think as I got older, I think I still struggle with it sometimes. You know, there's the whole thing of like Jewish appearing versus not, because Judaism obviously in a lot of ways can be like, it's invisible in many ways. So I didn't really think about them being separate things too much until like, you know, sort of learning more of the etymology of some of these words and intersectionality. But I mean, it's I've been thinking about it a lot lately of like we don't want to be, of course we want, I don't know, we want everybody, you know, the thin razor blade line of like wokeness, and like where do we start to exclude people again by accident because we're thinking so, you know, it can feel like somehow as a white appearing woman, like sometimes it's like my group requires I don't know. It gets very complicated because I don't want to say anything that's like exclusive. Like I don't want to say like, I demand to be like heard or whatever, but I just think, how can we all be heard?